Last but not least, we will learn about listening for leaders. Caleb Shulman is a certified trainer with Blue Sky Associates. For nearly 30 years, he has trained for Dale Carnegie courses to a variety of corporate clients. He instructs public programs open to multiple companies and individuals, as well as private in-house classes tailored to the specific needs and core values of individual companies. Caleb trains and coaches participants to increase profits for their companies. He develops confidence, sells ideas, presents ideas, and helps them improve their leadership. Have you ever noticed that those in leadership positions are excellent listeners? They don't normally interrupt, and they make you feel like what you're saying is really important. In this module, we will learn the importance of listening and what the different levels are. This was an interactive class that had conversations with the participants throughout, and some of it has been edited. Before we get into this final module, again, a reminder, one last time, rid yourself of the distractions. Take a deep breath, settle back, and really listen to listening for leadership.
Thanks so much, Kendra. I'm so excited to be with all of you tonight. Does everybody here know about the song United Breaks Guitars by Dave Carroll from, I think he's from Nova Scotia? It cost United Airlines $180 million because they didn't listen to Dave Taylor. When Dave was on his first trip with his band, the Sons of Maxwell, from, I think they're based in Nova Scotia, to their first performance in the United States in Omaha, Nebraska, stopped in Chicago. The baggage handlers were throwing his guitar around, and somebody noticed it. But when he got to the final destination, the neck of his guitar was broken. He spent 12 months going through incredible channels, even made friends with some of the people who worked in customer service with United Airlines. And one of the people in the book, United Breaks Guitars, about this experience he had, he became friends with one of the people who died of cancer. The lady died of cancer, and her family wanted to make sure that he had that he knew about it, and they were going to be able to have some kind of interaction so that he knew. So here he is, the one who's been wronged, who's made friends with the people who are stuck in this culture of not listening to their customers. And so the end result was that he said after 12 months, he told them, I have to write. That's all I can do. I know how to write songs. So I'm going to write songs about this. Wrote the song, thought it would get a million hits in 1 year. And it took 4 days for that song to get 1 million hits. And about that time, United Airlines stockholders' stock value plunged 10%, and they lost $180 billion because of that. So in Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People for the Digital Age, that's where there's a chapter called Listen Longer. And I'm going to read these words right out of it. The power of listening is the power to change hearts and minds. And even more than that, it's the power of giving people what they most desire, to be heard and to be understood. So this example to me really illustrates the importance of and the opportunity that we all have to listen as leaders. It's an elemental part of what we do. So with my experience working with Dale Carnegie, we've learned that people will retain 20% of what we tell them, and they'll retain 80% of what we tell them and they're involved in. Let's talk about a time when we have really felt like we were heard and understood. And if you can't think of one when you weren't. I really wish somebody would have heard me and understood me in this situation, and they didn't. And we could have had such a better outcome. I'll just give you a quick example. with Dale Carnegie, we have shifted most of our programs to Zoom. So I'll be graduating a program that's 13 weeks long, once a week by Zoom. Actually, we had to come into the 6th week of it with Zoom, and it had gotten halted in February. And we started up in October, and we're going to finish up next Tuesday. And as we were learning, I was working with another trainer named Therese, and we would talk back and forth about the ideas of how we can make Dale Carnegie work online. And the way she responded to me every single week made me feel so heard. It was a true collaboration. And when we finished this program, I just ran into one of the customers in a store last week who said to me, I was in on that Zoom call and I didn't even know it. He said, it was amazing. So it made me feel like what we were doing really worked, and the collaboration between Therese and I, because we heard each other. What feels good to us when we feel heard, and what doesn't? And I hear a lot of really people being dismissed, people having egos, and the things that get in the way of us hearing each other can just be really tough for us. And so some of those we won't be able to handle today. We won't be able to address, and maybe I can come back and do a workshop on another topic. Um, but let's just take a look at one of the things that helps us, and with Dale Carnegie we often do, is create an awareness first, and from awareness, then we introduce tools, and then we commit to use them, and then we apply them, and then we get results. Let's take a look at what listening really means. And there's 5 different levels of listening, and just kind of like nod and think to yourself, have I experienced this level of listening? Have I done this level of listening to somebody else? And what's the effect of it? Is it positive? Is it negative? Could it be better in my life? So the first one is ignoring. We don't listen. Maybe we do it on purpose because we're too busy, or maybe there's some reason. I was thinking about this with air traffic control. Sometimes you might need to ignore the person in your plane who's saying, "I really need a puke bag," because air traffic control is telling you that there's another Cessna at 12 o'clock, and and they're headed right toward you. So maybe sometimes ignoring can be a positive thing, but I think for the most part, we all would think ignoring is a negative, one of the negative forms of listening that's out there, and it certainly has a negative connotation, right? Then the next one is to pretend. When we nod and pretend we're hearing what the other person says, and we're not really giving them attention. Then we progress up to selective listening. We listen for what we want to hear and we formulate opinions. The next level is attentive listening, where we listen carefully for meaning and we have eye contact and we're patient with what the other person has to say. And then the deepest level of listening is listening empathetically, where we listen to accurately receive the intended message. So we would ask follow-up questions to find out if we're correct. Say things like, what I'm hearing you say is this. Do I have that correct? And we're really nodding and we're getting close to the other person and making sure that we've heard what they've had to say correctly and that they know that we care. So in our roles, which one of those is most important? Lucy says there's a plane that's 5 miles away coming right toward you. I'm not just going to start saying, oh, I appreciate that so much, Lucy. I'm going to let her know if the plane's in sight. So all of us individually could develop more skill at. I think one of the things with this person, Therese, that I was speaking about in our office that we had, I felt really heard. When we first started working together, she was more abrupt. And she really worked on making sure that she, was more patient and made you feel like you were heard. And she still keeps her, fast paced type A personality, and this other element of patience. And I only bring that up because whatever we're all doing is working to certain extents. Don't drop what we're doing. Just add other things also. So what could we add? There's an acronym um, called ladder, a way to look to respond to another person and practice so that we are better at connecting with them as we're while we're in a conversation. And the ladder acronym, what do you think the L might be for? While we're communicating with another person, listen and look. Look at the other person. How often do we have conversations with people who aren't even looking at us? Raise your hand if we ever experience that. What do we think the A might be for in the word ladder? Ask questions and acknowledge. Look at the other person, acknowledge them, ask questions. And then two Ds. What do we think is the biggest D that sometimes happens? Don't interrupt. The second one is don't change the subject. Do we all buy these? Um, express emotions appropriately. We don't have to take on the other person's emotions. We can just let them know that we understand and we care. And then the final one, the R, is to respond appropriately. So, what do we think we mean by responding appropriately? One of the things that we can do is in our conversations, we can be genuinely interested in the other person by asking a few different types of questions and getting to know them. And we could do this in our roles, whatever our roles are, whether we're curating at a museum or um, we're a pilot or any of the roles that we have. We can do this, and there's a few different types of questions, and the first ones are fact-based questions. So it would start off in an interaction with another person asking fact-based questions. And then the second group of questions are causative questions. So questions about what made somebody decide to go the direction that they have gone. Um, why did they pick their area of study in school? How did they get interested in a hobby that they had or something like that? Um, And then factual questions would be things like what are their interests, how long they've worked where they work. And then the third type of questions go deeper and they get into value-based questions. And when we can have a conversation like this with somebody else, we create an environment where we are heard and understood better. Sometimes we have to be somewhere and then it's a matter of being as polite as possible and saying, I'd love to hear about this later. And so it's just having the courage to jump in, have the courage to jump in. Another thing is I was telling Kendra when I watch the nightly news, when I watch MSNBC and I see the hosts like somebody like Lawrence O'Donnell interviewing someone and need to cut them off. And you start to hear them say, and they start to do vocalizing words like, yes, I hear you, it's something. And it made me wonder if they have a plan where when the host does that, then the person they're interviewing just stops talking because it seems like it always works, and it doesn't work for me that well. I try it because I see it, and it's another strategy. So, and then another thing is understanding that there's a reason too, and a couple of the different reasons for people to go on and on and on are either fear or not knowing how to stop talking. So then if they don't know how to stop, then we just have to step in as politely as we can. And then if it's fear, we can always be, as empathetic as we can for as long as we can. And when our patience runs out, then we're going to have to speak up and let them know we have to, um, I need to be somewhere or something, or thank you so much for this, or, anything like that. Be good to yourself. So tell yourself what you're doing that's positive. Maybe create a list, the things that you're proud of, so that when you get feedback, then you've also done really good work as well. And in order when we're giving the constructive feedback, it's easier for the other person to accept it when we can let them know what they're doing well first. So if you can keep the focus on what they're doing well, you rove the other part of the pool well. You're enforcing the policies over here well. I've got like 3 or 4 things that are going dynamite, and they're use and instead of but. And we also need that to be the case over in this one corner. And maybe ask what's going on. Just say, is there a reason why it seems like you're spending 90% of your time over here and 10% over here? And then listen to them. There's a place where listening can often help us because then we'll find out if something's going on. And then when we listen to the person and they've got something going on, what I've seen happen a lot of times is that just that sympathy and understanding gets them right on your side. Or when you've already started out with so much less of a barb, they'll say, "Oh yeah, I know." And I hear this a lot, like with tardiness issues. People, "Yeah, I know I've been late," and if there's an issue that's legitimate, it'll come up. It's tough because it's coming from a place of bias and predisposition, because you're a woman and looked down on in that situation, and that is really tough. And I'm not sure the best way to do it. Just a couple thoughts I have are sometimes it's okay to call people out on it,
Yeah.
I think, and to say, as kindly as you can,
Oh,
and I mean, probably if it happens on a regular basis at all and has happened your whole life because of who you are, it's tough to stay kind. And maybe, look at I this is the way it's got to be. And you could also maybe try to build a bridge to the person at first and just say, tell me about what your experience has been so far. You just came here. Where did you come from? And tell me about your life. And maybe a genuine interest in a person could soften them some. And then just kind of being tough, and just saying, this is our policy, with a smile and with strong posture that says, I'm not going to be putting up with this. It
right.
just reminds me of years ago, I was an usher at an outdoor amphitheater in Saratoga, New York, which is beautiful.
Mhm.
And the Grateful Dead came to play. And some Hells Angels came down to my section. And they said, "We're going down there and there's nothing you can do about it." And I just chickened out. I was like, okay. I mean, we have bodyguards there too. I was just an usher. And I was working with a lady who's probably 75 years old. And she stood with this stance and said, "You're not going past me." And I just, I wonder if, you know, you're not, sir, I'm glad you came from that far away. You aren't getting past me. The ability to care has to come from inside. We can't just pretend that we care. And we can have all the questions in the world, and it's only by genuinely caring that the other person will know that. And one of the ways that we do that is by talking to people and asking them questions about themselves and genuinely caring and wanting to know what they have to say. So what I've seen work a lot with Dale Carnegie is because it's time-spaced learning and it's 8 or 12 weeks long and it's once a week. So we'd have a group like this, and the group that will graduate next week has 22 people. So they've been hearing each other for 12 weeks, and all I do is facilitate. So there's 12 times 22. You have hundreds of times when you've heard someone. Now you can't stop caring. Oh, suddenly you can't turn off your ability to care. I had a person who worked in the bakery of a grocery store, and he came in and early in the class we were talking about the importance of being genuinely interested in other people. And he said, "Well, I don't know how to do this because I just don't care." And we were patient with this person, and eventually by the 10th class, he told the story about walking past a woman who was crying, and he said, I realized I really do care. And he turned around and he talked to her about what her concern was. And it was this huge breakthrough. It happened like 10 years ago. And everybody was so inspired because of it. And my point is that sometimes it takes practice. Like we have to really work on it, have conversations, ask people questions, and really care where they come from and their background. So we would start off with more fact based questions, things about where people are from, things about their family, things about their career, um, things about where they've lived in their lives, and then you switch gears to find out questions that are more about what how they decided on the path that they're on. So we have fact based, causative, and then shift into value based questions about, how did you decide the career that you or no, that's what the causative ones are. The value-based questions are questions about what advice would you give someone who's just starting out? Maybe what's a challenge that you had to experience and how did you overcome it? Or, what do you think contributed to your success? You could even say, tell me a story.
Mhm,
Tell me a story about something you're proud about in your
mhm,
life or
mm,
something you'll never do again that way. With the Dale Carnegie program, about 12 weeks into the 11 weeks into the class, we do a talk where we inspire others with a talk that was emotionally really important to us. And we had in one class two different people who spoke about miscarriages. One was a woman who experienced one, and one was a man. And the man wasn't going to talk about it, but the woman did first, and he was the second to last person to speak. And he said, I was going to do something easier, but because this person spoke about something that was so deeply important, I decided to also talk about an experience that my wife and I had when we miscarried a baby. Um, that wouldn't have happened in the second session of our Dale Carnegie class because we just don't know each other yet. So that also kind of just goes to the avenue of when and where, I think, to do this. Yeah. Thanks for asking that, and you're not alone, and I appreciate your honesty. Raise your hand if you ever have drifted off when somebody's been talking. There's, like, studies that will retain, like, 20% of what we're listening to in a lecture, and so that's why I said I wanted people to be involved. So we're retained more when we're involved. So a couple of the things we can do to be involved is it can be a discipline. So just think I'm going to pay attention really hard. And that was hard for me as a trainer because you're listening to people for 3.5 hours. And I have, drifted also. And we give feedback every time a person speaks. We tell them a strength we saw and where we saw it and how it will benefit them in their goals. And there have been times when it just like went in my brain on this side and out by the time I stand up to give the comment. And sometimes I've tried to pretend that didn't happen. And it did not go as well as when you say, I just totally forgot what I was going to say. So I think there's a couple points there. It's okay. It's okay to only be able to listen a certain amount. I think getting rest is something that's important. Do you get rest well, or is that an area that you could do better? So. Um, uh, Now I'm forgetting what I was going to say. So oh yeah, about rest, insomnia. Like there's a Dale Carnegie principle: just don't worry about insomnia. And he has a chapter. He says nobody ever died of insomnia. And I had this guy in IT who was in my class, and he was the most ferocious, angry-looking guy. And when we got like all the way through, and I was like, I don't know what this guy's problem is. And about 4 weeks into the class, when we talked about insomnia, I found out that he had insomnia because he was worried when he was on call, he would get called in the middle of the night. And I told him about this chapter, and it was like a switch went off in his brain. And the next class, he was happy, and he was happy all the way through. Like I remember this person's face and how it changed from 1 week to the next because he stopped worrying. So that's one thing that might all I mean, that's more about the rest and not as much about retaining information. Um, Let yourself get up and walk around, but sometimes we need to be able to do that. Uh, Do you give yourself permission, or are you in workshops or seminars where people are okay if you stand up and you get a drink of water and you move your body so you're not, so it's not so sedentary? Yeah, just do it. Just have to practice, practice and practice and practice. And I think one of the ways that also could help is to practice being genuinely interested. So, and it's hard to do because you probably are genuinely interested and have 1,000 things to do always. So it's hard to stop. It's better if you have something to motivate you. Like, what do you get? What will you get when you're able to hear the other person fully? Because it's not just going to benefit them, it's going to benefit you too. So if you can think about that, what you will get. So one of our training managers was telling a story about she was doing a lot of traveling and she was stuck in the Philadelphia airport during a snowstorm. And it was clear she wasn't going to be able to get home that night. And Philadelphia is like a real nightmare airport in the States. And she just was coming to terms with the fact she's got 3 kids and her husband travels all over the world. And she was coming to terms with the fact that she wasn't going to get home that night. And all of a sudden she hears, "Miss, miss, miss." And like the customer service agent is trying to get her to come up and figure out about the flights. And she goes, "I've been talking to you for the last 5 minutes. If you want to figure out when you're going to get home, you got to talk to me." And Melissa was all ready to talk to her in the way that most of us would. And she stopped and she said, "You must be having a really stressful day." And the woman stopped and she thought for like what seemed like a minute. And then she said, "Yeah, it's been really, really tough." And she said, "I can't get you home tonight, but I can get you home tomorrow morning on the first flight." And Melissa said it just shocked her how much this person changed from that job of being that wall to a human. And she said the real thing that inspired her was after that, the next customer, after Melissa going up to find out, what their flight situation was going to be, the lady says to this person, "Good evening, sir. How can I help you?" Just with all this warmth that never was there before. And she said at that moment, she really realized the importance of listening to understand and empathize with other people because you really never know what somebody else is going through. So I thank you so much for your openness and honesty and work we did tonight, talking about how we can do that to make a better world for ourselves.
Okay, we have just heard from our final guest. My biggest takeaway from Caleb's class was that There's different levels of listening. What was your biggest takeaway? Where do you rate yourself as a listener? How can you improve? Lots to think about listening and practice listening as you go forward in your life.